Hello, everyone. Today I'm conducting an expert review on the AAC application called Tap Speak Sequence. Um, After careful review, I found that it meets expectations overall, not exceeding and not meeting expectations. I used the rubric provided by Boyd and colleagues in order to evaluate certain criteria in regards to customizable motor skills, resources, and time based on research and cost effectiveness. I found that it was very difficult to locate research-based evidence and articles about the use of this application because it is a little outdated. It was created in 2010. And looking at the broad spectrum of how technology has evolved and how software and programming has changed, that does come into factor whenever we are talking about this. There have been updates, but based on the current application that I was able to review, it did not look super timely in the sense where it had a lot of outdated icons and was used on an iPad where the old iOS software was used. With that being said, I'm going to start the review. So first off, I felt that Tap Speak Sequence, I'm going to use the abbreviation TSS just for short, was great for a user that needed more situational communication for certain environments that required sequencing in the sense for social scripts or storytelling are examples of how it would best be utilized in my opinion. So in more routine communicative interactions. So TSS enables personnel who is verbal to record sequence messages for a person who is nonverbal or unable to use verbal communication as a means for them to express how they feel. So they're able to access this speech by tapping an icon on the left side of the screen that lists the audio recordings in a sequence. They're able to select to augment the speech one at a time or in all sequential order. I'm going to start with the customizable aspect. I said that it met most of the criteria, so at meeting expectations, because it did not offer accessible vocabulary and grammar in the app. It's mainly audio-based. So there's no vocabulary for the user to choose from, which left most of the programming up to the audio and to the adult or professional who is programming the device. One of the criteria that I found that it did exceed in expectations was that it allowed the pairing of words and pictures to audio recordings, in a sense where it was really good and user-friendly because the user could record a familiar voice or use a more natural tone, so it might sound more personal to the user. The app excels in this regards because it does allow for that. Let's see. So some of its shortcomings include that it doesn't have its own icons or buttons that are programmed. So this means that the user has to upload their own images or drawings or symbols. So this is in the standard version. However, in the plus version, which is how much? Which is a little more cost-wise, does have these buttons. It has over 4,500 of these icons that are available if you purchase the plus version. So unlike the other programs that others have reviewed, the user has more control over the audio. The application does fail to collect data on student and word language use, which is a huge limitation because it's important to see the progress of the student's use and usage. So I found that the customizable aspect met some, but not all. That's why I gave it at meet standards. It does have some data storage capabilities, but only if the Pro version is purchased, which means you can save more sequenced in recordings, so having more storage, I guess. Moving on to the motor skills aspect, I said that it exceeded expectations because it did meet all the, it checked off most of the criteria except for two aspects. Because it did not have the ability to organize vocabulary within the app, only within the sequences. So if I wanted to go to a category just about foods, that wouldn't be accessible, comparing it to other programs. This is important because it allows a user to, associate images with words and categories and subcategories. And it also did not have the ability to control the number of windows or screens that are opened, which is important for a user that might, accidentally tap an extra icon and have another window open. So I feel like that's another where it did fall short. Besides these two absences, in regards to utility for students with disabilities who might have motor functions that aren't as steady, it does prevent accidental selections by having screen control over the sensitivity. So it also does the select and on release response. So if they're if they accidentally have a tremor or a tap, and you can prevent this accidental selection in the settings category of the app. It does allow variability for the audio and pictures, and it can only be done by the user controlling, what audio is being put in and what pictures are being put in. So as far as adjustment of volume, you can adjust that. However, the size of the icons do stay the same. So whenever you are looking at the sequence on the list, it would be harder for an individual to select a sequence in order to produce that speech. So that's why I was kind of in between meet expectations and exceeding, because it had these shortcomings. In regards to resources and time that are needed to allocate to use TSS, I said that it did not meet expectations. This is because it does require and take a lot of time to learn how to operate this. I myself spent a couple hours just researching TSS and found that I still wouldn't really know how to use it if the application was given to me and put in front of me. And I feel like it would take time to teach students how to use the app. I don't feel like it is adequate enough to reap all the potential benefits from using an AAC device. I feel like there are other applications that could take less time. While the app is generalizable, it is helpful to build communicative competence. So in order to learn like the basic routines and turn taking in a certain greeting, I feel like it would be helpful in this regard. So with TSS, you're essentially able to create a message and sequence it to communicate, but and it's not a great app for, for beginner users. If they didn't want to necessarily sequence, they're kind of left to, just create individual audio recordings to, have that certain passageway to speak. So in this regards, that I said that the resources and time do not meet up, and therefore it doesn't meet expectations. So in regards to research, I said that TSS does not meet expectations because it has not been the subject of any research studies. After an extensive internet search using really good databases like ERIC, E-R-I-C, the Education Resources Information Center, there were no findings that documented this evidence of TSS as ineffective or effective. So I also use other databases like JSTOR and IRIS modules to see if anybody else had any information on it. But after a Google search, I was able to find a couple articles and blog posts of people using this application for themselves. And most of the reviews are positive. However, these are very outdated. So these people reviewing them were based in 2013. There was no really current articles that were speaking of TSS. I determined myself that the app is based on the universal design of learning practices by associating audio, visual, tactile learning, and did have ways to support users who have physical limitations. So with that being said, there's no research-based evidence, therefore it did not meet expectations. So moving on to cost effectiveness, I said that it did meet expectations, and looking at the broad spectrum of how costly AAC device applications can get, the standard version was $29.99, and the Plus version was $49.99, which is on the lower end of this cost set. However, in order to get that symbol library of 4,500 symbols from the Meyer-Johnson PCS core set, if one were to buy the standard version, it wouldn't even include these icons. So therefore, given that the cost is less than $50, it is affordable to obtain, but it requires the use of an iPad because the app is only available on iTunes. Therefore, that's an additional over $100 cost for an iPad. So it failed to meet the criteria in the sense where you kind of get where you pay for, and I don't think that the cost of this device is worth what you're getting. So with that being said, it is reasonably priced, but not for its value. So if you have checked out the YouTube videos that are posted above, I believe that these are very simple instructions, and it would require extensive amount of time for an adult or professional to set up a device with TSS on it. So after careful review, I would say I would not recommend this application to give to a learner. However, I think it is great for certain aspects in the classroom, such as storytelling, greeting, and kind of routine-based